Now to our major exclusive. ASIO Director-General Mike Burgess has told a private gathering that anyone who supports Hamas or the October 7 terror attacks would pose a security threat. These comments clarify his view on the Gaza visa issue. I can tonight reveal that Mr Burgess has made it clear that Gazans who want a Palestinian state will be allowed into Australia, while support for Hamas would be, in his words, a deal breaker. This is a major development in the saga that has plagued the government over the past month. Since Mr Burgess's appearance on the ABC last month, there's been considerable community confusion over whether Hamas activists were welcome in Australia.
If it's just rhetorical support and they don't have an ideology or support for a violent extremism ideology, then that's not a problem.
And then in question time, Anthony Albanese wouldn't answer the question twice about whether Hamas supporters would pass the character test for an Australian visa.
Prime Minister, does supporting Hamas pass the character test for an Australian visa?
Everyone who applies for an Australian visa is subject to the same security standard set by the same agencies and the same personnel as under the former government.
Well, after weeks of concern, Mike Burgess's new comments clarify his position on the issue. I can reveal that Mike Burgess told a high-level private gathering of business leaders and academics last week that it wasn't the case that he would give the green light to Hamas supporters entering Australia. I understand he told the gathering that any Hamas supporters would be considered by ASIO to be a security threat. He said words to the effect of, and I quote, "If you support terrorism, if you support what happened on October 7, then you are a threat to security." So Mike Burgess clearly stating there that any support for Hamas or the terror attacks of October 7 would be considered a security threat by ASIO. He also made it clear that supporters of a Palestinian state, but not individuals who support Hamas, would be allowed into the country. I understand he told the private gathering, and I quote, "Believing Palestine should be an independent state would not automatically disqualify someone, but providing material support to Hamas or harbouring extremist beliefs would be a deal breaker." So Mike Burgess is now saying that supporters of a Palestinian state would be allowed into the country, but harbouring extremist beliefs or providing support, material support to Hamas, would be a deal breaker. Mike Burgess also spoke about how more people in Australia are being radicalised and how it's impossible to keep tabs on everyone. He also spoke about the approach taken by the organisation he leads, ASIO. He said, again I quote, "ASIO takes a comprehensive and in-depth approach to its security checks, as defined by the ASIO Act. Each case is taken on its merits. We look at everything to determine if a person is a direct or indirect threat to security, not just one thing." And he also told the gathering that ASIO cannot go into the details of the security checks process because the more applicants know, the more likely an extremist will be able to use this to their advantage. Suffice to say, ASIO's checks and advice are part of a bigger process that's administered by Home Affairs. Now, my story tonight comes after considerable concern and confusion in the Australian community about how the possibility of Hamas activists arriving in Australia could be allowed. Mike Burgess's comments now clear this up from a security perspective. He is saying unequivocally that support for Hamas or for the October 7 attacks would be considered by ASIO to be a threat to Australia's national security.